And hello again from Fox News in Washington. We may remember this past week as the moment when voters across the country decided public worker unions have too much power and benefits that are too generous. But was it a turning point or just a bump in the road for government workers? Today we'll hear from both sides. We'll talk with top officials of big labor in a few minutes. But first, from his home state of Indiana, Republican Governor Mitch Daniels, who has fought and won against unions. And Governor, welcome back to Fox News Sunday.
Morning, Chris.
There have been several big developments this week, of course, in Wisconsin. Governor Walker beat back the recall effort, but also in California, two cities, San Diego and San Jose. In both of those cities, voters passed initiatives to cut back on government worker pensions. Governor, what's the message?
I think the message is that, first of all, voters are seeing the fundamental unfairness of government becoming its own special interest group, sitting on both sides of the table. And they're also noticing the sadness that when fundamental services, education and health care and others, are diminished because so much money is being devoured by very high salaries, higher than those that the taxpayers themselves are earning, more generous benefits, almost bulletproof job protection, and huge pensions.
Is this some sort of watershed, what we're seeing right now? Are voters across the country giving state and local officials a green light to go after or at least curtail public unions?
I hope nobody thinks of it that way, but I hope it means some kind of turning point in trying to redress the balance. You know, there's a reason that defenders of labor from Franklin Roosevelt to George Meany to many others always said that unionism had no place in the public sector, that it was a necessary freedom, and it is, in the private sector, but that it was a bad idea in government. And I think we've seen through its excesses, the ones I just mentioned, now visible to voters almost everywhere, that it really needs to be brought under some sort of control in the interest of the people who pay the taxes and who would rather see those taxes, more of them, dollars, go to vital services.
Well, are you saying that you would like to see no public worker unions?
I think really government works better without them. I really do. You know, in our state, we had a 16-year run with so-called collective bargaining, and we did end it. And I want to say that although it led to the saving of large amounts of tax dollars, it wasn't principally about that. We had 160 pages of shackles, really, on government's ability to deliver services better. And 7 years later, we're delivering services across the board in a much more effective way to people. We could never have made all these reforms tied down by those 160 pages of thou shalt nots.
Well, give me an example. How have services improved since you've cut back on the unions?
If you're deserving a tax refund, it comes back twice as fast as it used to. Our state parks are in dramatically better shape than they were. And if you go to our Bureau of Motor Vehicles last month, you're out in less than 10 minutes, and 97% of the time when we survey them, our customers say they're satisfied.
Well, let's look at what you have done as governor of Indiana, and it's a long list, so let's take a look. In 2005, you ended collective bargaining rights for state workers on your first day in office. In 2011, you restricted teachers' bargaining rights. In 2012, this year, you signed a right-to-work law that says people don't have to join a union to get a job. It sounds, Governor, like a pretty concerted effort to break public and private unions.
Don't see it that way at all. Now, I will say that on the government side, we felt that if we were going to do right by taxpayers and if we were going to make government work effectively, as it now does in Indiana, there was a survey last year in which 77% of Hoosiers said they thought their state government was effective, as the second highest number in the country. If we were going to do those things, we really had to have the freedom to move resources where they were needed, move people where they were needed, pay people on the basis of their performance, not simply their seniority. And we're doing that in the state now, I think, to very positive effect. Right to work in the private side was a very different disagreement, Chris, and there it was simply a matter of trying to bring more jobs to this state. Indiana has been winning 2/3 of the time when we get a shot at new jobs. We have been rated as one of the best jobs climates in the country by everyone now. But there was a very large percentage of the time, maybe a third of all the opportunities, we didn't even get a shot at because the businesses, for their own reasons, insisted on this freedom. So two very separate questions as we saw them. We're not going after anybody. We're just going after better government and more jobs for people in our state. But
to take a look at this and all the reforms, as you would call it, government workers in your state have taken a hit. Indiana ranks 46th in state worker gross salary. Public employees in Indiana must pay a lot more for health care coverage than they used to. I mean, they have paid a price because of all of your actions.
I disagree completely. Particularly those who have been rated as the best performers have had the highest raises by far in recent state history, in fact, ever in state history. I think we have a fairer system now. State workers praise them all the time, and I think the ones I encounter are rightly proud of the job they are doing. And as I just mentioned, their fellow citizens appreciate them here in a way that maybe is not the case elsewhere.
But what about this figure that I just gave you? Indiana ranking 46th of the 50 states in state worker gross salary.
I don't know where they come from, and I've never seen them before, so I can't comment on them.
I mean, have in fact, we have a lot of information that in terms of gross salary, in terms of the cost to the state worker of health care benefits, that those have gone up a lot.
Well, Chris, all I can tell you is that we believe, and others do too, the most effective state government in America. We have very low turnover, lower than before, among our state employees. Maybe that says something. We think we have the best health care plan anywhere, and it is one which is leading to much lower increases in costs. By the way, 93% of Indiana state workers have a health savings account. They are accumulating tens of millions of dollars that they control in those accounts, and they are renewing at a very high rate, satisfaction rate every year. So, we're not really believing that we've done anything but improve the lot of Indiana public employees.
Let's take a look, Governor, at the big picture. In a sense, it's almost a philosophical question. Don't unions have a place in this country, and even in the case of state workers, public workers, and with government, to make sure that management, in this case government, doesn't run roughshod over them?
I, once again, would differentiate between the two sectors. Absolutely, there's a place in the private sector. I think there are some issues here. Their problems didn't start with Scott Walker. There's been a 40 or 50-year decline in union membership. The world of work has changed. Workers have changed. And unions, I don't think, have changed sufficiently to go with them. So, as you know, private sector membership is down under 7% now. And that can't be blamed on Scott Walker or, frankly, anyone else in public life. Again, on the government side, honest people can differ. But there's, I think, a fundamental problem with government becoming its own special interest group, forced dues recycled into politics to elect compliant and friendly politicians in an unending circle. And ultimately, there is not really bargaining in those situations because government sits on both sides of the table.
Looking ahead to November, is there a danger here for Republicans? The Obama campaign is just out with a new ad that we're going to put up in a second that in effect says that Mitt Romney has become the enemy of working men and women. Let's take a look at the clip.
It's time for us to cut back on government and help the American people.
Governor, is there the danger of a backlash?
You know, that ad could be read cynically as simply playing to the core constituency of the president, which is government itself and the people who profit from it. But honestly, I've concluded over the years it's not that, that it's just sadly symptomatic of the incredible blind spot he has. He does not understand where wealth and jobs come from. They come from a successful private sector or not at all. You know, we've got the biggest government we've ever had and the weakest recovery ever on record. And I think, honestly, the president, this week he said, if I read correctly, and to my amazement, he said, yeah, the private sector is doing just fine. It's government that needs more money. Well, government, you know, does not create wealth or income. It just shuffles it around, and it charges a price, a cost for that service or disservice.
Let me interrupt for a second, because in that news conference on Friday, the president said one way to boost the recovery is for Congress to pass his Jobs Act, and specifically he asked for $35 billion more to save or create 300,000 jobs for teachers and first responders. I take it you don't think that's a good idea? I don't. Been there, tried that, to the tune of $800 billion in his so-called stimulus bill, which was overwhelmingly not the new bridges and roads and infrastructure that some of us thought might be the idea. It was overwhelmingly just more money shoveled into government. No, this is a tired and discredited theory, and but I do think the president sincerely believes it. And there, I guess, is a fundamental disagreement that the American people will have to settle this fall. Finally, we have less than a minute left. After his victory this week, Governor Walker of Wisconsin said that he had some advice for Mitt Romney. He said it is not enough for him to run simply as the anti-Obama this fall, that he has to run as a reformer. And he went on to say this. He, meaning Romney, has to offer a plan. He has to show a willingness to take on the big challenges facing the country. I think he can win if he does that. Is Walker right? Does Romney need to offer a bold, affirmative agenda?
Yes, absolutely, for two reasons. One is that's the most successful, I believe, campaign strategy for him. The American people, I think, will rightly demand to know something more than he's not President Obama. But secondly, he's got to use this fall as an opportunity to build a consensus across, I hope, a broad spectrum of Americans to make the big changes we need to restore a vibrant private sector and all the good things that come with it, including more dollars for government. So that's exactly the right advice. It would be, I think, a huge mistake for Republicans to misread Wisconsin as some kind of great harbinger. I don't see it that way at all. I mean, there was clearly a threat of an enough already vote there that basically said that this is an abuse of the process, all these recalls. Not even clear that that Governor Romney will be that strong in Wisconsin. So he better have an affirmative, constructive message and one of hope. And I think that he will, and that's why I think ultimately he'll prevail.
Governor Daniels, we want to thank you so much for coming in today. Always a pleasure to talk with you, sir.
Thank you, Chris.